Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Killin Smallz podcast. I'm your host, Mike Small. This podcast is a part of the Painted Lines Podcast Network. You can find Painted Lines on YouTube, as well as going to thepaintedlines.com. You'll see great articles and podcasts about sports and culture. Also, please make sure to give me a follow on Twitter. That's at RealMikeSmall, and I'll follow you right back. Today's guest is NFL agent Mike McCartney, who's making his third appearance on the podcast. Mike is going to give us his thoughts about free agency in the NFL and if tanking is a viable option in the NFL. We'll also talk about the NFL draft, the Philadelphia Eagles, the Miami Dolphins, and all their free agency work, and lots of other things. Kick back and enjoy the podcast.
Shut up! You're killing me, Smallz.
Okay, welcome back for an unprecedented third time to the Killin Smallz podcast. Mike McCartney. Mike, welcome back.
It's always good to be on with you, Killin Smallz.
Well, I know it's, I guess you're like the Steve Martin of the Killin Smallz podcast. You are now the leading host like he is for Saturday Night Live. But so first of all, thank goodness for the NFL. I mean, while we're all in isolation and dealing with all we're dealing with, the NFL was fascinating last week with the opening of free agency. I've got to think it's a busy week for you.
Oh, yeah, it was definitely a busy week. And I agree that the diversion was probably great for sports fans. It was nothing really changed for me other than I was working out of my house instead of working out of the office. But it really started Saturday night. We went to bed on Saturday night not knowing if the CBA was going to be ratified by the players, and whether it was ratified or not was going to have, a big implication on free agency. And so waking up Sunday morning and finding out that the players did pass the new CBA it meant that we were going to have a more vibrant free agency because there was more money to spend for teams. And then we spent Sunday not knowing if we were going to have free agency on the following day. And it was probably early evening when we found out that it was a go-ahead. So from that point on, the rest of the week was a little bit of a blur for me. There was a lot going on for sure.
Well, one of the first things that was reported was Kirk Cousins extending his contract and reworking it a little bit. How fast is that? First of all, congratulations on that. You have done right by that client for sure. I mean, multiple franchise tags and the first guaranteed contract and now an extension. How long does it take to put something like that in place?
We met at the Combine a couple times, and we talked about a couple different structures. And ultimately, they made an offer a couple days after the Combine. I countered, and we had a lot of dialogue at that point. So we agreed on Monday morning, the week of when free agency started. So probably a few days prior to that, we got to a point where we knew we could potentially get a deal done. But working with Minnesota is great. Rob Brzezinski's our cap guy. Rick Spielman's the GM. George Payton is the assistant GM, and you can have great dialogue with them. You can be completely transparent. These negotiations aren't easy, but I still enjoy working with them because there's no pretense. There's no high-low. I get tired of the high-low game in negotiating contracts. I much prefer to just get right to it. The only way you can do that, though, is to build relationships with guys so that you can get right to it.
Well, what was the most difficult part of last week for you? Because one of your players got a franchise tag. You dealt with Kirk's extension. You've had a couple other players sign. How are you able to, one, balance all that? And two, how were you able to pull that off in such a short amount of time? And what was the difficulty like?
Well, balancing it is, I feel like one of my strengths. I prepare a lot for that time period, and those couple days of free agency where it's really intense. And I'm wired, and I'm gonna borrow a phrase from my dad. I'm wired, fired, and inspired for that week. So it's something I really look forward to. I'm really energized. New England putting the franchise tag on Joe Thuney was definitely a surprise. we had negotiated a little bit last summer, and New England was one of the teams that were probably going to be really handcuffed if the CBA didn't pass, because had we gone into the last year of the 2011 CBA, one of the provisions that would have made it tough on teams is any incentives that are normally considered non-likely to be earned all of a sudden count against the salary cap. And my understanding was New England was going to have $17.1 million of incentives hitting their cap. So because of that, they really didn't know where they were going with a few players. And I saw them at the combine. I talked to them the week after. And only when the CBA was passed did it give them clarity of what they could do. So they called me on Sunday. We had agreed to see what happened the first few hours of free agency, and I assured them I'd stay in touch, and that Joe was still interested in New England. Well, when I woke up Monday morning, I had a couple offers from them, a 3-year offer and a 5-year offer. And so free agency was starting at 11 my time, and the franchise tag window was ending at 10:59 my time. So about 9:15, I called them up and said, hey, this isn't quite what we're looking for, but let's, just like we said, the day before, let's stay in touch, and, we'll definitely be, talking and sharing with you, what we're hearing. And they were fine with that. And then at 10:30, literally 30 minutes prior to the start of free agency, they called and they said, hey, we're going to put the franchise tag on Joe. First time I ever heard the words franchise tag from them. So it was disappointing, because
that doesn't happen often for a guard.
Well, no, the franchise tag is based on the top 5 paid offensive linemen.
So it's not really separated by tackle. So he's getting tackle money.
He's getting left tackle money. In
wow.
fact, the highest paid guard prior to Joe was $14.05 million a year, and Brendan Scherf and Joe Tooney are at $14.781 per year. So it's a dramatic, increase. But it also is a 1-year deal, whereas in free agency, our hope is to get a multi-year deal with a sizable signing bonus and a chance for Joe to, pick and choose where he wants to play. We didn't have a expectation, or there was never any forewarning from New England. So to get that call a half hour before his opportunity to go find out what his true market value was hard and disappointing. It's not disappointing for him to stay in New England, but it's disappointing to not have that opportunity to go out in the open market. But the most challenging part of free agency that no one's talking about, at least for some, was e-signatures. So when we sign contracts, a lot of times you can do it on your phone, and you write out your name with your finger, and then you download that app, or from that app you upload, I guess, to your email account, and you can send it to the club. Well, the NFL doesn't allow it anymore. The NBA does. Banks and financial institutions move millions upon millions of dollars, but for some reason, the NFL doesn't allow it. If I'm in my office, probably not a big deal, because we've got a great printer. We can scan. I can get a little help. I just print it out, signing, no big deal. But in my home office, it's a little bit bigger deal. And so for the player.
So you're talking a multi-billion-dollar organization is held up because of e-signatures. The app's no good, and nobody's open at the post office or FedEx. It's difficult to do it and get it there quickly.
Yeah. So in Kirk's case, we had to have the thing signed before 4:00 Eastern on Wednesday. And because his cap number was going to change, the new league year was starting. And so Wednesday, both Kirk and I spent hours trying to get this accomplished. Ultimately, I ended up downloading an app and just turning it page by page. And of course, the first time didn't go well, and I'm getting very frustrated. And I'm still trying to get other players signed. So e-signatures was a pain in the butt last week, a challenge that no one really knows about. And I'm not sure that's going to get any better for us.
Who would have guessed? So, So I'm always interested in, especially I love free agency. I love the transactional part of sports. no matter what the sport is. I just think that the team building aspect and the financial decisions is the most fascinating part of it until you watch it all come together. Now, when you see what happens in free agency in the NFL, the first week out, there's a flurry. There's teams spending tons and tons of money. And then all of a sudden it comes to like this sudden halt. Is that because people are waiting for the draft to see what the rest of the money is? They went after their targets. They may have gotten them, may have not gotten them. And then they make the decision to say, okay, let's see what we get in the draft.
Well, I think that's some of it. I think it's supply and demand. I think that there's certain positions where teams aren't very strong in both free agency and the draft. And so there's just such few opportunities to get better. And so there'll be a flurry there. The quarterback position was unique this year. Usually supply and demand is on the side of the player. This is the first time in recent memory it was really on the side of the club. Going into the free agency period, kind of felt like there were going to be 2 or 3 main quarterbacks who were going to be left without a starting job. And, Jameis Winston, Cam Newton, and Andy Dalton sitting here today don't look like they're going to have a starting job in 2020. So supply and demand plays a factor. Free agency has definitely changed in the last few years. It goes so fast now. I wish it was more like baseball. I wish we could take our time and have players visit facilities and meet staffs and find out about culture and all those things. There's no chance for that anymore, especially with a big ticket guy. And, if let's just say Joe Thuney had hit the market and I would have had a number of teams, offering us a lot of money. Well, it's hard on those teams to wait on a guy with a large dollar offer out there and then potentially lose out on the rest of the free agent market. So everyone on the team side is in such a hurry to get it done, and it impacts players too. So yeah, free agency has changed a lot here in the last few years. When we started this tampering period for a couple of days, I can remember the first year expecting my phone to ring. It was 11 a.m. on a Saturday morning. And I think I had Josh McCown at the time, and I got 1 call on Saturday. And then I got maybe 2 calls on Sunday. And I believe we started Tuesday back then. And then Monday it started to heat up a little bit. Now it's just, literally at 11 o'clock, the phone is ringing. And so many guys, like you said, are done on Monday, if not Tuesday.
I'm curious. You've had multiple quarterbacks. Josh is a great example. Have you ever been in a situation where 2 of your guys are both contenders for the same spot on a team and you've had to kind of nudge it one way or another?
Yeah, I wouldn't characterize it that way. At the end of the day, the teams will make the decision on who they want. We can get into conflict situations for sure. A couple of years ago, Josh had finished as a New York Jets starter. The New York Jets were interested in Kirk Cousins, and I just made sure that I was going to over-communicate as opposed to under-communicate with them both. And ultimately, the Jets told Josh that they were going after Cousins. So it was good for Josh to hear it from the Jets, and better than to hear from them than me. But I had talked to Josh a whole lot about what was going on. I talked to Kirk a whole lot, and they're professionals. They get that there's going to be, situations. At least with me representing them both, they were both informed. If Josh is, let's say the Jets are going after another quarterback, not named Kirk, well, then he's not going to be informed of what's going on. So there is a little advantage to having the same agent involved, as long as there's good communication and there's honesty. It can definitely come up a little bit, and I just try to, like I said, over communicate as opposed to under communicate.
So the Miami Dolphins spent a ton of money in free agency. The Buffalo Bills spent some and traded a lot of draft capital. New England lost Tom Brady and some other players. I'm not going to ask you for free agency grades because I don't believe in that, but based on your perspective, who really helped themselves over the last 2 weeks?
Yeah, I think the teams that added, multiple players. I think, like you said, the Dolphins, have done a good job of adding players really throughout their roster. The problem in answering that question, though, is some of these players may not pan out, as we know.
Right. Are they the right players, right? I mean, I'll never forget the Nnamdi Asomugha contract the Eagles signed. I was like, wow, that is one of the best signings I've ever seen. And all of a sudden, the dude couldn't run anymore. It's crazy.
It is. And there are many examples where free agency fails, and there are many examples where free agency, the team flourishes with those signings.
Right.
So, I think when we draft players, sometimes we give them a grace period to settle in with a team and get acclimated. We don't give free agents that same grace or acclimation period. So, and a lot of them need it. They're getting new coaches, there are new systems, and a lot of these systems are complicated, and it just takes time. You can just think of when Kirk went to Minnesota. Year one was going to be a challenge for him, and of course he's going to be better in year two, and then again in year three. So, it is hard to grade or evaluate all these moves, and you can't help but say, okay, I like this player, so I think this team did a good job.
Yeah, how's it going to fit? How's it going to fit with the draft, right?
Yeah, the teams, though, they have this cap space that can fill holes. If you think of players in a crude grading sense, you have Pro Bowl type players, you have good starters, you have adequate starters, and you have good backups and weak backups. Well, you don't want to have, weaknesses. You don't want to have backup starting. So the teams that can fill those holes in free agency and again in the draft, those are the teams I think do a good job.
Got it. So I'm curious how much studying you've done about the around the draft. I know that you've got some players that you're representing, but it's really starting to become theater, thinking about the first round and the quarterbacks, the top three that they've talked about, or four really, if you include Love for sure. There's whisperings that Miami really wants Joe Burrow, and maybe they'd be willing to trade out their haul of draft picks for him. Tua released the video yesterday where he looked pretty good. I don't know if you saw it, but it's hard to tell a guy doing one drill, but it's nice to see him on his feet and throwing the ball again. And, we talk about the other two, Justin Herbert, who looks like Tarzan. And I don't know if he plays like Jane. We'll have to see. But there's questions about him, and people really like Jordan Love. Have you had a chance to study it? And do you have any thoughts on the quarterback situation?
I haven't studied it like I would if I was a scout. I've watched all these guys, and I think you characterize it pretty good. It depends on really what teams are looking for. We can just look back a couple of years and look at the Mahomes, Watson, Trubisky draft and say, how the heck did it go down that way? So it's
well, look at your draft where you had Kirk Cousins behind. Who was it? It was Luck, Tannehill. Who were the other ones before Cousins?
RG3.
Yeah. And look who's still going.
Yeah, and so it's there's so much that goes into it, right? And it does seem like Joe Burrow's a no-brainer at number one, but when the quarterback gets there, is there the right coaching? Is it the right scheme fit? Are they going to be able to protect him in year one, where typically the rookie quarterback's not getting rid of the ball quite as quickly as he eventually will? There's, is there the right receivers getting open? I mean, there's just so much that goes into it. And, you find out a lot about those quarterbacks, and, if they get hit a lot early, Trubisky seemed to get hit a lot early, and, it affects them. So, there's just a lot that goes into it. So I've certainly watched these guys. I haven't studied it like I would if I was on the team side. I got a feel for a few of them. And it's an exciting year. Having four guys is a lot. So I could see a scenario where all four go in the top 10.
And the best player maybe going number 2. So we'll talk about that. So let's take a break. One of the things that you and I have argued about over the years is, can a football team tank for one player? It works in basketball. Is it a good idea in football? And we're on opposite sides of that. Let's talk about that when we come back.
great.
So what does it mean to get fryered up? It means you need to call my guy Kobe Fryer if you're looking for a car. He runs Matt Blatt Kia right here in Toms River, also in Egg Harbor or Glassboro, New Jersey. I've known this guy for 35 years, and the reason I say you need to get fryered up is when you call Kobe Fryer, you will feel fryered up because the guy's going to get you the best deal that you need to get on a car. Whether it's getting out of a lease, whether it's finding a car for your teenager, whether it's just upgrading to a super cool car like the Kia Telluride, which is the Motor Trend SUV car of the year, you would be fryered up to reach out to this guy. Any credit situation can be handled with ease. Give Kobe a call at 609-706-2101 or get in touch with him through this podcast, and I'll put you in touch with him directly.
This is Ian Rappaport from NFL Network. You're killing me, Smallz. Stay tuned for more from Mike Small.
What can I do for you, Rod? You just tell me, what can I do for you?
It's a very personal, very important thing. Are you ready, Jerry?
I'm ready.
Just want to make sure you're ready, brother. Here it is. Show me the money. Jerry, does that make you feel good just to say that? Say it with me one time, Jerry.
Show you the money.
Oh, no, you can do better than that, Jerry. I want you to say it with meaning, brother. Hey, I got Bob Sugar on the other line. I better hear you say it.
No. Show you the money.
Not show you. Show me the money.
Show me the money.
Yeah. Louder.
Show me the money.
That's it, brother, but you got to yell.
Show me the money.
I need to feel you, Jerry.
Show me the money.
Jerry, you better yell. Show me the money.
Okay, welcome back to the podcast with Mike McCartney. And I just played a clip from Jerry Maguire's. Anybody ever ask you if your job's like Jerry Maguire's?
I get the question all the time, and yeah, it's nothing like that.
So you're telling me that Kirk Cousins has never called you and said, Mike, show me the money?
Kirk Cousins has never said that to me. Now, maybe he says it to his little boy when they're watching the movie at home, but he hasn't said it to me, nor has any other player.
It's probably not the best characterization of what you do.
It really doesn't depict what we do. You know, so much of what we do as agents is art, not science. It's building relationships. It's understanding people, understanding how teams work, you know, understanding the strengths and weaknesses of your own guy. And every guy's different. Every guy's different at the negotiating table. You know, I have one guy that can be really strong, empower me tremendously. The next guy who I can have a great relationship with just doesn't have the stomach for it. So, you know, how he handles it versus the first guy can be completely different. So every negotiation, every relationship, you know, is unique. And, you know, so again, it's like I said earlier, it's art, not science. And it takes time to kind of learn, you know, those relationships, the people in the league, and when to push and when to pull.
So we're going to have a debate now, and let's try to keep this civil. Okay. So, so as you know, I'm a Miami Dolphins fan, and I'm also an Alabama football fan. And I knew that as a Miami Dolphins fan, my team was going to be pathetic last year. And I also, as an Alabama fan, have seen every game Tua Tagovailoa has played in college. So I'm a huge fan. I think he's spectacular, and I think he's unique, and I think he's going to be amazing as long as he stays healthy, which I guess is a big if now. But I was annoyed last season when Miami started winning games at the end of the year because I felt that they could be in the driver's seat for whomever they want if they would have just lost 2 more games, which is true. Now they have the 5th pick instead of the 1st. You think I'm nuts. I'm going to let you defend your position.
I'm going to defend the right position. So in the NFL, you only get 16 games, and you have to have a culture where you're trying to win football games. And I was impressed with the Dolphins head coach coming into a situation where people are clamoring this ridiculous tank for Tua notion. And
I think I made it up, by the
imagine-
way. I don't think it's. I'm very confident. I met Tua's parents his sophomore year, and I told them I'm a Dolphin fan and we're going to tank for Tua. So I really believe I'm the one that made that up.
I believe you believe that. So, but can you imagine Brian Flores getting in front of the team and saying, guys, here's how we're going to win football games. Here's how we're going to build a program that's going to sustain. Now, we're going to wait a year, because we're going to try and lose games so we can get this quarterback who, by the way, could have a hip injury and maybe not play in 2020, but that's still going to be our approach here. We're going to do everything we can to try and get better during the week, but we're going to lose on Sunday. Like, to me, that's just
all right. Well,
absurd.
let's be fair. He didn't have the hip injury until long after this process.
But that's part of the point. You don't know what's going to happen with any player in college. You don't know if the guy's going to fall in love and all of a sudden not want to play football again. There's so many factors that go into it. And when you're talking about a team, of a 53-man roster, I don't believe in that. But what I do think happened was Brian Flores did get in front of the team and he says, hey, we're going to build this culture and we're going to work and we're going to get better every day. And as we do that, we're going to start winning games in the second half of the season. When I talked to him last week in free agency, he was interested in a safety of mine, Clayton Fedulum, core special teamer from the Bengals. And I said, hey, coach, I'm very impressed with how your team got better every week. And to be completely candid with you, had you tanked, I would have no interest in sending my player to you. But you have so much momentum going into this off season because of the way your players every single week worked, grinded, and got better. And you saw the fruits of it with a couple wins at the end of the year. And so, here's the beauty of that for you, Mike, as a Dolphins fan, is the guy that you want for them, Tua, may be there at 5 because of this injury. Either way, Miami's got a lot of ammunition. They can move up to 2 if they have to. I just think they're in a much better situation, and that's why they've attracted so many more free agents, because they have a culture that's about winning. At the end of the day, players certainly want to get paid, but they want to win too.
All right, so that's a fairly good argument, and I'm not going to go at you too hard on that. But the one thing that I would say is, when it's down the stretch and, you have a chance, what you're looking for as a fan. Now, I mean, I'm also a self-proclaimed or an admitted fan of the Philadelphia 76ers, and I do believe that their process worked. And what I was rooting for during that time was close losses. Show me that you're making progress. Show me that you're in it, and that we just need to take the next step. And this way I'm engaged, and this way we'll get the higher draft pick. So maybe that is crazy in football, but I still think that, maybe you start Josh Rosen instead of Ryan Fitzpatrick, and you get a look, you say you want to get a look at him. We're out of the playoffs, and then you're going to lose the game. I think there were ways to do it without Flores standing in front of the team saying we're trying to lose.
I think players are a lot smarter than people give them credit for. And if the team is trying to find ways to lose, the players are going to know that. And they're going to know it based on the work during the week. They're going to know it based on how the game plan comes together. They're going to know it based on the play calling. And they're looking around too. They're looking around and saying, are we trying to win, or are we playing Josh Rosen, whoever it might be? And so, when they saw that, hey, this coach and this staff and this organization is doing everything they can to help us get better, and we want to win games, that's why the Miami Dolphins ended the season with that kind of momentum. I go back to this too. I remember Andy Reid's first year in Philadelphia. We had drafted McNabb. We were starting with Doug Peterson at the time, and McNabb ends up playing the last 5 games, and we win the last 2. We beat the Patriots to knock them out of the playoffs, and then we beat the Rams when Kurt Warner and the Greatest Show on Turf went for about a half. We went sort of toe-to-toe with them for half. We ended up winning the game. And so we end up 5-11 with 2 wins to end the season. And we had momentum. We knew it. Everybody in the organization felt it. When our players came back in March, there was an incredible energy in our locker room. We knew we were going to be a good football team. And sure enough, we ended up winning 11 games and going to the playoffs next year. And the following year is when they started their run of 4 straight NFC championship games. So building a culture on grinding and competing every day and trying to be the best you can be is much better, in my opinion, than tanking for one player. And I think that the Miami Dolphins do have energy. And I think we've seen it with all the additions they've had in free agency. I think they're armed to have a great draft, with all the ammunition they have, with their draft capital. And so I'm excited for the Dolphins. And I'm very impressed with Brian Flores and Chris Greer, the GM.
All right. So we can both agree I won the argument. So let's move on to the all right, I'll call it a tie. Let's talk about your former team, the Philadelphia Eagles. They didn't do much in free agency. They did grab a defensive tackle. People are going crazy here that they haven't signed a wide receiver. Have you had a chance to follow the Eagles, and do you have much of a feel what they're about going into the offseason?
I'm like anybody trying to follow everything that's going on in the NFL. I know that a couple things at the receiver position, it's arguably the best draft for that position for top line receiver candidates and depth. So any team that needs a receiver for sure in the draft is going to have ample opportunity. And I think we saw that the receiver market wasn't what it has been in recent years because of that. Because everybody knows in the draft they're going to be able to get some quality receivers in the second, third, even fourth round this year. I read where they got 2 corners for, I want to say that their combined cap number is around $5 million this year. So give them credit for that, getting Slay and I can't remember the slot nickel, Roby Coleman, I think.
Yep.
So, I think it's so easy to get excited when teams come out the gate in free agency and you see a lot of movement. But there's more to it. There are a lot of players still that are good quality football players who aren't going to get paid very well. And so teams that are patient are going to benefit, and so I don't know where the Eagles are headed with the rest of free agency, but they got a pretty good nucleus and they've upgraded a corner. They're going to have ample opportunity to upgrade a receiver. And I just think that there's still more to the story to be told.
Okay, so let's have a little bit of fun with the rest of the podcast. So you were a scout, you were a coach, and now you're an agent. Let me ask you a couple of crazy questions. So who is the best player that you've ever seen live in any position? One player.
Barry Sanders.
That's a good one.
Barry Sanders was unbelievable in college. He was unbelievable in the pros. When he played at Oklahoma State, he played against my dad. We were at Oklahoma State. I want to say it was 1988. They were beating us pretty good. He got in late in the game and he took a punt return, maybe 88 yards. It was electric. The next year, maybe that was 86. The next year in 87, he came to Boulder and he was unbelievable. He made athletic guys who were in the NFL the next year just look foolish. And then, I get hired by the Chicago Bears, and our first game was against the Detroit Lions. And I don't know if you remember the clip where Barry's kind of downfield, maybe 10, 15 yards. He gets in a pile, and all of a sudden he just spins out and goes the rest of the way. That was the game. I thought he was the best player I ever saw on a football field.
Yeah, that's a really good one. So let me ask you this. In terms of film study, have you ever been surprised where you studied somebody on tape, whether it's for a draft or free agency, or even when you were working in college, and you weren't impressed, and then you saw them on the field and you were like, oh my God, this just pops. This is completely different than what I studied.
That's a tougher one to answer. I do remember, this isn't going to answer your question directly, but I remember watching Aaron Rodgers early in his NFL career, thinking to myself, Aaron's very talented. He's got a live arm. And then I went to a game at Lambeau Field and watched him in person. They played Baltimore on a Monday night game, and I was mesmerized by him in person. So that doesn't really directly answer your question, but I'm trying to have I haven't been a scout for a few years, Mike.
No, but I'll tweak the question a little bit because that's a really interesting answer. But what about the other way? Was there anybody that you were blown away by but disappointed in person?
Disappointed when I met him finally. No, I mean I don't know if anybody jumps out. I've certainly recruited players through the years, and I thought they were going to be really good. I'm having a hard time answering that, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm putting you on the spot.
Give me a little forewarning.
I'm putting you on the spot, but that's what I like to do. Last question for you. We're in the middle of COVID-19 and isolation, and the NFL has decided that it will go forward with the draft, just not with a lot of people there or anybody there. How different is that going to be, and how different is your business looking forward? I mean, I know you said earlier in the podcast that you're working from home. It's just a little bit different than working in your office, but not just for you, but the business of the NFL, aside from the draft, what's that going to be like, and what changes in your opinion?
Well, this virus and the fact that our country is essentially shut down, and the NFL, as of I think 6:00 tonight, has to be completely shut down from working in the building standpoint. It's going to have a major impact on the draft preparation. March and April are two big months to see guys in person at pro days, and then visit with them in person, in their facilities. And so all that's out the window at this point. And so I do think there's a doom and gloom nature that I've been hearing and reading about that I'm not completely buying into. I think that the teams that rely on their scouting staff and rely on the tape that they watched during the fall and the homework they did on campus, those teams will have a chance to make really good decisions. The teams that have traditionally relied on their coaches getting involved in March and April and not necessarily relying so much on the tape, those teams are going to be at a disadvantage. So at the end of the day, as far as it pertains to the draft, there's still going to be the same number of draft picks. There's going to be the same number of guys signed after that there's always been. Will there be individuals hurt by this, especially at small schools or guys that maybe weren't healthy at the combine or didn't have their best combine? There are, but there's also guys that are going to benefit from it too. So I don't think there is a doom and gloom nature to it. I think, Mickey Loomis, who runs the Saints, came out and advocated to push the draft back because it's just going to be really difficult for teams to make good decisions. I get that. I understand that, with having your staff separated, it's going to be difficult for teams. I think with technology, and sitting here in 2020, you can get around it, and it's maybe not ideal, but where's anything ideal in our country right now? And to the point where we started this podcast, the NFL has been a terrific and only sports diversion we've had, for guys and girls who love, sports. So, I'm maybe being a little selfish, but I hope they keep the draft and we at least have something from a sports standpoint to talk about here in the next 4 to 5 weeks.
So great to have Mike McCartney on the podcast. I probably should have mentioned this earlier. Mike alluded to it during the podcast, but Mike is the son of Bill McCartney, the legendary football coach from the University of Colorado. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. If you want to hear more Killin' Me Smallz podcast, download it on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. Give us a rating, give us a review. And again, please follow me on Twitter @RealMikeSmall, and I'll follow you back. Thanks, everybody.